We go as we finish up officially, finally. Unit 6 is just a little piece. Again, I said it wouldn't really affect understanding migration today. But this is kind of neat. This is one of those countries that we tend to not talk about a lot until the 20th century and World War II. But what this little mini lesson will show you is how they got there, because it actually begins here. Like, this is the birth of modern Japan. So, before we move on into the next unit, which is all about conflict, let's have our little final piece of stage set, and we'll begin with Japan and the Meiji Restoration. Okay, this is blocked by me. The Tokugawa Iemochi. This is the current shogun leader, sort of ruling figure in Japan at this time, at the dawn of the Meiji Restoration and the rise of the Meiji in Japan. All right. Move the mouse. By 1850, this shogunate and the shogun and the shogunate was sort of like it's the ruling family. It's a little more involved than that, and but they were declining. Japan was going from a very central government to a decentralized government as the daimyo. These are the sort of local area officials working for the shogun. Begin to protest his effectiveness as a ruler, some of his economic decisions, and so at the beginning of the 1850s, he's feeling pressure from within his own country, for the sake of his job, his position, etc. Another thing that's going to happen is this guy. This is probably his greatest claim to fame, and the president that we're about to read right here. This is definitely the only time you're ever going to hear this man's name. It's like the first time I've ever heard his name mentioned in a world history class at the high school level. But Commodore Matthew Perry arrived with a fleet of warships and a letter for Tokugawa from President Millard Fillmore. So there, you've just learned a new president. And what that letter said was basically, look, you've had a history of doing things. Everybody's had a history of doing things. There's been ancient ways of doing things, but time changed. It's time you rewrite your ancient laws and come up to speed and join us so that we can trade together. If you let our ships into your country, we'll pay you cash or anything else your subjects prefer. So basically, he's just saying, why don't we just go ahead and do this? You need to change your laws. They're old, outdated. The world's more hip. You got to get with the program. So that's the plan. That's the letter that I have grossly paraphrased, sent to Tokugawa. Of course, it was met with the typical Japanese reply. This is a poem that doesn't translate well into English, but basically, the ships are noisy and smelly, and they mess with our peace of mind and our peace, so we don't want them here. They called them the Black Ships. Admiral Perry demanded a trade link, and again, during this time period, Japan is staunchly isolationist. It has been their thing since they were a thing, since they've been Japan. They've worked earnestly and diligently to remain isolated from the rest of the world at this time. So pay attention to this. Okay. Here's just a cartoon suggesting what the Japanese should do to all the foreigners. Basically, throw them out, if not kill them. But this is interesting, and I think this is sort of like the turning point in Japanese history as far as what we think or how they go from being this isolationist country to being the Japan we know about, with invading China and leaving the League of Nations and bombing Pearl Harbor and all that stuff. It's a letter, and I don't know the source, but it's fascinating. Basically, they're saying, look, if we drive any foreigner away, or especially the Americans, they're going to commence hostilities. They're going to, become hostile towards us. If they do that, we're going to have to fight back. We'll be obliged to fight back. It'll cost us money. Our citizens will suffer. So why don't we do this? Let them in, learn from them. We don't have the mechanical. I like to say they're not the equals of the foreigners in the mechanical arts. That's a wonderful way to describe engineering. So let us have relations with these foreign countries, learn their drills and tactics. And it will not, oh, it's not working. It will not be too late then to declare war. So once we learn how they work and what they do and how to make what they make, then we'll agitate them and go to war with them. I mean, it's a it's a huge pivotal moment. You know, it's one of those in the periodization pieces where you're trying to pick those moments where things change. If you were doing Japanese history, this quote in 1853 is a pivotal moment. The Meiji Restoration is one of those moments in Japanese history, as evidenced by the test you took. So they signed this Treaty of Kanagawa. It was unfair. It was definitely it was U.S. heavy. But again, they did this to avoid war. And also keep in mind the letter and Japan's thought process while all this is going on. And then this just states basically the agreement where the ports will be, how we're going to trade, how it's going to look. Just we're all going to be big friends, and we're going to get along. We're going to trade, and it's going to be great. And these are the two places: Hakodate and Shimoto. All right, now that deal with Matthew Perry, coupled with the daimyo rebellions against the shogun that we spoke of at the beginning of the presentation, led to the Tokugawa shogunate being overthrown. So those two things just spelled the end, and now there's going to be a new sheriff in town. And this is that sheriff. Mutsuhito, who was 14 years old, became the emperor and took the title of Meiji, meaning enlightened ruler. Again, it's fascinating. I don't know. For an isolationist country, I mean, the idea of enlightenment obviously isn't solely European. That's just one of those cool things that I noticed now, having taught this class. That the connections are there if once you get used to it and once you know more, and you'll all get better. All right. So let me read this. The Emperor of Japan announces to the sovereigns of all foreign countries and to their subjects that permission has been granted to the Shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu to return the governing power in accordance with his own request. We shall henceforward exercise supreme authority in all the internal and external affairs of the country. Officers are being appointed by us to the conduct of foreign affairs. It is desirable that the representatives of the treaty powers recognize this. Basically, there is a new sheriff in town, and we're going to put new people in town, and we're going to see how this goes. All right. This document right here is the secret order to overthrow. Let me back up. The secret order to overthrow the shogunate. I'm just moving me out of the way. There's the shogunate, the last Japanese shogun right there. During the Meiji Restoration, the emperor was a figurehead, okay? The idea of the cult of the emperor was used to legitimize the overthrow of Tokugawa. Basically, we've always had emperors. We need to have emperors, and we had to get rid of the shogun because it just wasn't the way we do things. All right, so they used history, they used how they've done things in the past to aid their cause to move forward. The Meiji Restoration, led by oligarchs, several men, a small group of people, were intent on making Japan a world power. Again, this is different than isolationism. I mean, in a way, I mean, to be a world power, that means you're going to be involved and engaged in the world to avoid being taken over, because they see very shortly and they hear very shortly about what's happening in China and other places. In 1868, the emperor signed the Five Charter Oath, ending feudalism, allowing social mobility, and ending isolationism. Huge thing. Social mobility is huge. The fact that Japan is going to join the world is a big deal. And then these are just some of the things that are introduced. Maybe see I move these up. I can't. Whoops. Um, all classes, high and low, shall unite in vigorously carrying out the administration of affairs of state. The common people, no less than the civil and military officials, shall each be allowed to pursue his own calling. Evil customs of the past shall be broken off, and everything based upon just laws of nature. Knowledge shall be sought throughout. So this is a big change. This is a very enlightened kind of way of thinking. So this is a very marked change in how Japan views things. A couple other things: the daimyo are stripped of their hereditary titles and to their land, and the samurai are forbidden to wear their swords. Um, so this is pretty much the end of the samurai. And in fact, there's I'll get to it. Here are leaders use forced conscription. So you had to serve, whoops, by force in the military. Here, I'll join the military. Um, and they begin to use modern weapons, modern strategies. Again, this is all part of learning how the West works. And then using that and marrying it with their culture, sort of their enthusiasm for life and order and things, and then uh, stepping out. All right. In 1877, 1878, this modern army defeated the rebellion of the samurai. Okay, so they no longer have any power in Japan. There was a, excuse me, a Tom Cruise movie called The Last Samurai, which kind of deals with this fight in this war, I believe, and it kind of shows them in a different way. But samurai were not, by the end of this, they were not the all great kind of sword wielding people. They were hired security in a way. They were paid not to cause mischief. Kind of like knights in medieval Europe were kind of kept busy so that they wouldn't cause problems. Fukazawa Yukichi was a Japanese student in the United States. He brings back stuff, and the Japanese revamped their education system. There's now universal schooling. There's science and technical training are stressed, and the elite students study abroad. Again, most countries that we've seen so far in these last few days send their best and brightest to study abroad, to learn from those people. So even if they don't respect them or see value in them, they have to acknowledge grudgingly that there are things the West has that they need. Japan recognizes it. I don't know if they respect the West for having it, but they recognize that there are things that they need if they want to achieve their goals. Being faced from the outset with a need for experts, we sent talented young students to Europe and America to master various fields of science and technology. And when the task was accomplished, we established all kinds of schools. All right. Students receive traditional moral education like loyalty to Japan, Confucian values. Again, centripetal forces. Remember, learning this stuff in school can lead to nationalism, and that's going to help them feel more like they're Japanese. Also, during this time period, they add we'll get to it. They increase the size of Japan to the islands that we know today. The Meiji leaders purchased Western businesses in Japan and discouraged foreign investment. So basically, they bought them out, and they focused more on exportation than importation. So they buy out the Western businesses, have them leave the country. They keep the businesses, and then they begin to export those materials for themselves. That's pretty shrewd. From the beginning, we realized fully how necessary it was that the Japanese people should not only adopt Western methods, but that they should also speedily become competent to do without the aid of foreign instruction. In the early days, we brought many foreigners to Japan to introduce modern methods, but we always did it in such a way as to enable the Japanese students to take their rightful place in the nations after they had been educated. So again, the plan all along was to extract education like a resource in a way, and training like a resource, and then use that resource to build your economy. Opened the country to drive out the barbarians. We were barbarians. All right. Foreign loans paid off as Meiji leaders increased taxes to pay for reforms. 3% tax on farmland proved disastrous for farmers. But again, if you can, this is all about, let me make me smaller here. This is all about not losing your dependency to the West, to foreigners, and being self reliant and being able to self sufficient and take care of yourself. So if you can get those loans paid off, then those aren't hanging over your head either. Industrialization prioritized factories built by government and given to wealthy Japanese family called the zaibatsu. Um, so wealthy families got the factory. So there's a little bit of socialism here. If you think about the three schools of thought. Mitsubishi, which means the three diamonds. Zaibatsu originally headed Japan's program to sell Japanese goods in foreign markets. Later, they became involved in dealing with transportation issues for the Japanese military. Mitsui originally sold dry goods and high quality kimonos. Mitsui evolved into banking when they were put in charge of converting taxes paid in rice to money. Interesting. Sumotomi Zaibatsu began as Tokyo's largest bookseller. Um, Today, Sumotomi owns 17 different companies, including Mazda. And then finally, Yasuda Zaibatsu was involved in the finance industry. It was dissolved after World War II, but Yoko Ono, the wife of John Lennon, is a descendant of the Yasuda family. So these are like the first four families in the big. This is the beginning of Japanese industry, and you see here where they go after that. That's really kind of cool. All right. Mitsubishi headquarters in Tokyo. Mitsubishi Company, founded by an ex-samurai, Iwasaki Yataro. Mitsubishi and other Zaibatsu companies receive government contracts. Again, that's good. That's a good steady income if you can have the government pay for your stuff. That's just a nice job to have. The government's Ministry of Industry operated mines, shipyards, and steel factories, weapons production, and they set economic policies. So it appears that Japan initially, not truly a capitalist market, very, very socialist in that the government's controlling the big things: mines, shipyards, factories, weapons production. Um, so, not at least not in this presentation are we hearing much about private industry and private investment. Are we to delay the using of steam machinery until we have discovered the principles of steam for ourselves? If we can select examples, okay, there you go. So they'll figure it out while they go. Well, Japanese ingenuity. By 1890, the Meiji Constitution created a bicameral parliament, including a House of Peers for the elites and a lower house called the Diet. That's nice. Following the model of there, that's probably following a Western model. Here is the emperor is sort of the sovereign head of state. The prime minister more or less runs the state. Okay. So the prime minister head, again, it's a figurehead. It's very much like the queen. This just kind of shows you how it works and what decisions are made. It's very interesting, and it was cool for me. I'd never seen this before, so I thought it was really, really neat. So yeah, the Diet had legislative powers, but served basically as an advisory role. Only 5% of the Japanese population owned enough property to vote. So again, here, like early colonial America, like other early pre-Enlightenment and maybe during Enlightenment countries, property was tied to voting. Again, another similarity between other cultures, East and West. So the Meiji Restoration brought revolutionary changes to Japan, combining authoritarian government with capitalism. Fascinating. Again, they were so driven. It's almost. And I don't know if I, excuse me, should use this, but command economy ish from the standpoint of, look, we are driving this engine forward. We are moving forward. We are going to catch, because they're trying to catch up. They've been isolationists. They recognize that they were mechanically deficient. They were deficient in the mechanical arts, and they are doing something about it. And when you have to make changes that rapidly, it requires a direct government involvement. Japanese focus on nationalism, on power and wealth, led to a wave of imperialistic expansion in nearby lands, especially China. Um, Japan expanded north into the Hokkaido region and the Kuril Islands to limit Russian expansion, and they went south into Okinawa and the Ryukyu Islands to the south. That's where Godzilla is. No, I'm kidding. They also, in 1894 and 1895, they fought the Sino-Japanese War. It was against China. They won this and took control of Korea, Taiwan, and the Liaodong Peninsula, which is right there. They then go to war against Russia in the Russo-Japanese War. Um, Notice how, okay, 10 years later, Japan won, and they validated control of Korea. They were able to keep it, and they expanded into Manchuria, which is rich in natural resources, which is why Russia went and took it and wanted it and put part of the railroad there. What's the purpose of this cartoon? You know what? I don't know, because I don't know who the chickens are. I don't know who the cocks are, the roosters are. If I knew, I could tell you. So maybe we should go find it online and see if it's like written in there, like that other cartoon we saw when England was stepping on Africa, the crocodile. All right. Japan, like the Europeans, justified brutal imperialist policies on alleged racial superiority. They saw themselves as the superior Asiatic people, especially with respect. And I find it interesting that they felt that way because I'm pretty sure the Chinese felt that way as well. These are Japanese soldiers beheading Chinese soldiers, citizens. The Meiji Restoration, that coupled with aggressive imperialist expansion made Japan a major world power in the early 20th century. Again, 50 years. It's analogous to Germany. They came to life. Germany became a country and got going. Japan just received a wake up call and said, okay, this isn't going to work. We need to look out for ourselves. So let's go. And they did. They call it the greatest miracle in world history. The mighty empires of antiquity, the major political institutions of the Middle Ages, and the early modern era, the Spanish Empire, the British Empire, all needed centuries to achieve their full strength. Japan's rise has been meteoric. After only 80 years, it's one of the few great powers that determined the fate of the world. And that was written in 1940. So, I mean, and that's right on the eve. Because by 1940, Japan's in China, Japan's in Southeast Asia, and, depending upon when this is, they're a year away from bombing Pearl Harbor. It's an amazing transformation. And that's the Meiji, excuse me, restoration, the modernization of Japan, and Unit 6 is now officially finished. I'll upload this tomorrow. We're going to look at the causes of World War One. I will record the war itself, unless I can think of another one to do instead. Next week, I'll leave that up to you guys to let me know. I will see you all tomorrow. I hope this works, and have a great day. Take care, everybody.